choose one time, morning or night, before you brush your teeth. This is so that you could remember to do this. Send a note, an email off to somebody expressing a gratitude for something that they did for you that day. It does not have to be long, so don't feel pressured. It literally could be like, thanks for opening the door for me. I felt that was really nice, you know?
Parents, it's time to celebrate. The new On Purpose Parents podcast, a Saddleback Parents podcast, has arrived. And we're here to help you win at parenting. As parents ourselves, we know that parenting is the toughest, most important job on the planet. You can't possibly do it alone. And now you don't have to, because we're your people. Connect with us by texting the word parents to the number 83000, visiting us at onpurposeparents.com, and tuning in every Wednesday with Kurt, Grace, and Chris for tips, ideas, and encouragement to help you win at being an on-purpose parent.
Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of On Purpose Parents. I'm Kurt.
I'm Grace.
We're both parents, and so is producer Chris.
What about me?
Yeah, producer Chris is the parent of 3 children.
Yes.
Grace and I each have 2.
Yes.
2 younger girls.
2 girls, 10 and 7.
10 and 7. I have 2 adult children, 25 and 28.
You look like you had to think about that for a
I do.
moment.
I'm still not sure I'm right. I could be off by a year or 2 either
Your kids
direction.
are going to call you after this.
I'm in the margin of error, as they say. And then your kids, Chris, are also adults.
Yeah, girl 23, girl 27, man 32.
Wow.
32.
32. That is a man. 32. And you're my age.
Yes,
Man,
I am. Except
Calling
a few
him
years
out.
younger.
Yeah. You're not a few years younger. You might be. Anyway. Well, hey, we are so glad that you're back. As always, our conversation revolves around how do we as parents help each other? How does this podcast help you raise your children to be interdependent, lifelong followers of Jesus who want to make a kingdom contribution? That's sort of the target that we've painted. There's other targets out there. We just believe that more important than college graduation, more important than the career, more important than getting into the right college to start with, more important than getting a varsity letter in football, more important than all that stuff is kids who end up loving Jesus and being interdependent, which means they can kind of find their way in the world, but they're not alone. Yeah. They rely on others, and they use the gifts and the talents, the way God shaped them to make a difference in the world for the kingdom of God. That's what we think matters the most. Along the way, things like college and friendships and grades and sports, all very important stuff. Yeah. It's just not the most important.
Right.
And that's why we don't talk a lot about it on this podcast. Yeah. Last episode, we ended by reading a question that we got that we decided, that one needs a little bit more time.
Yes.
And the question was basically, if I can recall, I don't recall exactly how it was written, but the subject of the question was, what do I do when I'm feeling overwhelmed? So this one isn't so much about your kids. Yeah. This one's about you as parents. Yep. How do we parent, or what do we do with ourselves or for ourselves when we as parenting feel overwhelmed? Which is a vital topic. And I think that one of the reasons it's so important is because you, as a parent, you can't give what you don't have, right? Like you can't draw water from an empty well. And so taking care of yourself and figuring out, what do I do when I'm overwhelmed? First of all, whoever wrote the question, I mean, it's not hard to identify when you're overwhelmed. Sometimes it's hard to ask for help. Yeah. And to do the work or to think differently or whatever it might be, maybe create new habits, new rhythms, new patterns to get out of that ditch of feeling overwhelmed. There's work involved. Yeah. We talked earlier, nothing good happens by accident, right? The idea of intentionally parenting our kids, having a goal in mind. Well, you got to be intentional when it comes to, how do I protect myself from being overwhelmed? What do I do when I feel overwhelmed? You're not just going to get out of that automatically. Yeah. And so it's going to take a little bit of work and effort. And we're going to give you guys some thoughts today on that, because all 3 of us have felt overwhelmed as parents numerous times, right? Yep. And in some ways, it's healthy to feel a little bit overwhelmed, because parenting is such a big responsibility. If you never feel overwhelmed as a parent, I would suggest you're not doing it right. Like, you're not doing it right if you never feel overwhelmed. The overwhelmed is a sense of responsibility, a sense of stewarding this wonderful gift that God has entrusted with us. There should be an appropriate amount of like consequence and responsibility, and maybe even an appropriate amount of overwhelmedness.
Yeah.
Like we want to visit there. We recognize it's always going to be kind of there, but we don't want to be consumed by it.
Right.
We don't want to live in a constant state of what I would maybe say is like this crippling overwhelmedness.
Yeah.
And so we're going to give you guys a few things to think about. Here's what I'd like to do today, Grace.
Yeah.
Instead of us just going back and forth, why don't you just share your thoughts?
Yeah. Would love
And
to.
then, I might throw a thought in there, once play some color commentary.
Yeah.
And then I'll do the same, and you can toss in your thoughts along the way. But we'll just kind of, you go to town for a few minutes, and then I'll go to town for a few minutes.
Sounds like a plan.
Okay.
All right. Well, I just want to echo what Kurt said. Whoever or whoever's, I think there was probably more than one who filled out the survey of questions and put that question out there. We appreciate you. And I would venture to say that probably almost everybody listening to this topic today is going to relate to this topic. So if you are the one who submitted the question, just know you are not alone.
Yeah. A lot
You
of
are
people
not
go,
alone.
That wasn't my question, but it could have been.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. So for me, I have three things, suggestions that I have, and that have been things that I'm still holding on to and working through when I feel overwhelmed, when I feel just burnt out. Because when you're in that state, you can't think clearly, you're irritable, you're tired, the world doesn't look right, and it really does interfere with your parenting. And that's something we want to help try address today. So for me, when I'm overwhelmed, it really does help for me to take a breath and first think, what is the source behind my feeling overwhelmed? So I have just three things. One of the things that causes me to feel overwhelmed is when I feel inadequate. Feeling like I'm just not good enough, and I'm missing the mark. There's a study done by this research firm Ipsos in 2021. This is so interesting. Found on an average of 28 surveys, so it was an international study, that 82% of parents said that they felt judged from sometimes to very often. And if you think about that, and that stat went up higher.
Judged in their parenting.
Wow. Judged for what they were doing or what they weren't doing. And in the United States, if you narrow it down, that went up to 92. So if you're thinking, and that's probably something anecdotally we can relate to, like how many of us just, whether we're putting it on ourselves or other people are putting it on us, how many times do we feel judged as parents and just feel like we're not doing things right? And it makes us feel overwhelmed if you constantly feel that. Like every day you just feel like I'm missing the mark. And one of the things for me that I find that gets exacerbated by is when I'm comparing with other people. When I see other people doing things so much better, their kids are so well behaved, they're signed up for all these activities. I haven't even looked at the summer program yet. I'm so just missing the mark.
I'm going to interrupt real quick.
Yeah.
Producer Chris.
Yes.
Can we come up with a sound effect that anytime we hear a really big word, you hit the sound effect, and maybe the person needs to explain the word, or we just need to give a little hat tip for an acknowledgement for using such a big word. Grace, you use something our inadequacies are exasperated by. Right? That's a that sounds more like that's more like a fairy waving a wand. It's like I grant you my wish. That's the wrong sound effect. That's the wrong sound effect. What do you got? What else you got? There you go. That's very long. Oh, you can cut it. You can cut it as short as you want.
Oh, yeah. That's pretty cool.
Is there just like a woo woo? Is there just like a
like a little quick one?
There's a record.
That's if you use
I'll look for one.
That's his homework. Is that your homework?
The applause isn't bad, but maybe you find like a quick little. I don't know. Something like ding, 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 something.
I like that ding, ding,
like
ding.
you win a prize for using a big word. And exasperate is not a super big word.
Yeah.
It just is to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it rolls off your tongue. It just rolls off your lips. You use it multiple times. I'm not quite sure.
Exacerbated?
Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Oh, because I said exasperated, which is like I'm
both.
overwhelmed and tired.
Yeah.
What to do when I'm exasperated is sort of the topic we're talking about.
Right,
But
exactly.
what was the word you used?
I think I said exacerbated. Like what? Huh?
That's the fairy sound, producer Chris.
I love this.
It's growing on me.
Right.
The fairy sound's growing.
When we find ourselves comparing ourselves to other people, our sense of inadequacy gets more exacerbated.
Is that a word?
I think so. I will have to look it up.
Exacerbated.
Is it not, Emma? Did I make that up?
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
Okay. See. That's why we need the fairy sound because. Okay. Sorry.
Yeah.
So it gets exaggerated. It gets increased.
It does. Yeah,
Okay,
and it does. And the thing is with comparison and how it stokes how you feel inadequate is a lot of times it's just not true. So I have a quick story. I have a friend who's an adult parent who was a flight attendant, a single mom, and she always felt so bad during the holidays because she would take her kids during her flight trips, right? And so their holidays were not around the Christmas table. They were in a hotel room, for Christmas, for New Year's, for Thanksgiving. And she always felt so bad, so inadequate. Like, I can't provide for my kids what every other kid has and what they deserve. But what's so amazing is that when they were adult kids and when they were getting married and, kind of have the opportunity to talk to mom, they were saying one of their best memories growing up was, the holidays with mom in the hotel room, because it was so fun. They got to eat snacks. She brought home like souvenirs from the airport. They would be jumping on the bed. I mean, for them, it was a beautiful childhood memory. For her experiencing it, she felt so inadequate. And I think what I want to leave behind with this point is that you are enough. She was enough. My friend was enough. Like, what her kids needed was her and not her perfection, not this, experience that other families are having. Your kids don't need that. Your kids need you. And if you're feeling like that, if you're a listener feeling so inadequate, we just want to encourage you that you are better than you're giving yourself credit for. The fact that you're even listening to this podcast, feeling overwhelmed, probably looking at the title and saying, I need to listen to this one.
Right.
You're amazing. You're out there. You're trying. You're growing. You're trying to figure out what to do. That's amazing.
That's good. So one trigger or one thing to think about if you're feeling overwhelmed is oftentimes overwhelmedness is triggered by a feeling of inadequacy. You're trying to be too much. You're trying to do too much. You can't measure up to your own expectations. Therefore, you feel overwhelmed and inadequate. Awesome.
Right. Yeah. All right. And a little practical tip there is if you have social media, maybe just give yourself a little bit of a holiday. So that could be something you walk away with there. All right. A second source. Another time when I feel overwhelmed is when I feel exhausted. There's too much to do. It's a little interrelated with what we talked about. They're all, in fact, interrelated, but just kind of leaning into different aspects of it. There's too much to do and not enough time to do it. And the thing is, that's true. There is too much to do. There's always something going on, too much going on, and you're not going to be able to get it all done. But it's a bad feeling, and when you feel like that, you can feel overwhelmed. I don't know how many people, are doing well with their New Year's resolutions so far, but a lot of times, we start to get into February, and it's already like, don't ask me how my resolution's going, because it doesn't feel good to feel like we're failing our goals. But with this one, the important thing I think to monitor, remember here is to monitor and manage your expectations, acknowledging the very specific season you are in. So a few years ago, my husband and I, we decided to run a marathon. We were not runners. So it was like kind of like a bucket list thing. And it's so much work. It's like we joke that it's like a part-time job because you got to be committed. And even just everything leading up to the race and the race, it's just really intense. Now, if you were to ask me, you should do that when you're pregnant and the race is the day after you give birth. I mean, that's a really silly example because I would say, that's ridiculous. Like that's not reasonable. That doesn't make any sense.
Right.
There's no way I could do all that training, all that thinking, all that research, all the running, and be pregnant, give birth, and then run the marathon. But the reason why I share that illustration is I think as parents, we place that exact expectation on us and we dismiss the scenario. We think we should be able to train for that marathon and run that marathon no matter what the situation is. And that's not reasonable. And if you find yourself in that position, one question you could ask yourself is, who's placing that expectation on you? And a lot of times it's just ourselves. Mm-hmm. We're just placing this expectation on ourselves and then just kind of messing our own kind of peace of mind. And I think if we can just relax, then be a little kinder to ourselves and adjust it for a season. For me, I used to be able to take red eyes really easily to visit my family in Chicago before kids. I was efficient with my travel. But kids, oh man, if I do red eye, it's like the worst thing in the world. It's like disaster. And my kids recently were sick, and like the house right now is not pretty. And I feel that thing coming up inside of me, like, the dishes aren't done, the laundry's not done, the house is a mess, and it can start to build up. But hey, my kids were sick. It's okay. My job was just to take care of them. That's all I need to be doing.
Yeah, it's good. So sometimes the overwhelmed can be brought on by a feeling of inadequacy. Mm-hmm. Sometimes a feeling of exhaustion. Mm-hmm. I'm just trying to do too much. I got too much going on. I'm running the parenting marathon.
Yeah.
And trying to get my best time ever.
Yeah.
In a season when I just need to survive the race of being a parent.
Right.
So inadequacy, exhaustion, and give us your third one there.
All right. Well, one quick practical tip on that exhaustion piece is something that's helped me is on a Post-it note. I just write this phrase and put it up and read it, and it's really helpful. It says, "Today I did my best, and that is enough." So if you're a parent out there that's feeling, like your checklist is too big and you're not accomplishing it, one suggestion is just write this down. Grab a Post-it note right now if you have it next to you, or a piece of paper with tape. Write, "Today I did my best, and that is enough," and put it on your mirror.
That's good.
All right. My last one is a source of feeling overwhelmed is when there's too many problems that I can't fix. My kids have issues. There's things happening in the world I don't like. There's issues with my job, and I want to fix them, or I want them to be fixed, but I can't do it. And one example of this for me would be ever since kindergarten, Karis, my 10-year-old now, has this habit that she's developed of picking her nails. So for like 3 years from kindergarten, I never clipped her nails because they would be so short, sometimes so painfully short. And as a mom, when you look at your beautiful kids' hands and they're like ripped, it makes me like my stomach curl, like
I'm hiding my fingernails right
now. Do you pick your nails?
Oh yeah, I pick them.
I
pick them. I bite them. I chew them.
I need.
So good luck trying to get your daughter to stop. It's a hard one. It's a hard habit to break.
And even hearing that is actually so helpful because my daughter is 10 years old now. This started since kindergarten.
Right.
I've tried everything. I've been the cool mom, like, yeah, that's okay. No big deal. It's fine. I've been like, no, cares. You cannot do this. I've done like run the gamut. I've tried like just whatever it is. Right. But the thing is, and sometimes there are good times, some good seasons, and then not good seasons. And as a parent, when you can't control that other person and you can't fix their problems, and I dwell on it, and it can just feel so bad. And I feel overwhelmed, like I'm so frustrated right now. So the thought that I would encourage parents out there that might be feeling this right now is just remind yourself. It seems simple, but it's really powerful. You are not God.
Yep.
And much of our strain comes from when we try to control things that we're not designed to do. Like that wasn't God's intention for our nature. Like we're not supposed to control other people, their decisions, their emotions, their choices. And we may be hurt by them or have feelings about them that we can acknowledge, but we just need to remember, what is it that I'm supposed to do, and lean in on that. So the practical tip I'd have here is, it's a challenge. If there's any parents out there that are feeling this focus, this over focus on all the things that they can't do, that they can't fix, and all the things that's wrong with other people and in the world, is to shift that focus to gratitude. And for me, that's been a real powerful tool. So my challenge to listeners, parents out there that are feeling this, is every day this week until our next podcast and you join us, before you brush your teeth, and you could choose morning or night, send a note.
Are you choosing Are you saying we only have to brush our teeth? We get to choose whether we brush our teeth at morning or night? Or you're saying during the morning or night brushing, we get to choose when to do this exercise?
Thank you for that clarification, because I don't want, people to think out there I'm telling them, all the dentist parents out there to think that, we only brush our teeth once.
Yeah.
Choose one time, morning or night. Before you brush your teeth, this is so that you could remember to do this, send a note, an email off to somebody expressing a gratitude for something that they did for you that day. It does not have to be long, so don't feel pressured. It literally could be like, thanks for opening the door for me. I felt that was really nice, and send us an email. How will that experience have been for you? I think, and what I hope is that daily focus on looking for the things to be grateful for will start to really transform your kind of inner peace and your mindset. And I think that will be something that will really help kind of shift the focus when we're feeling overwhelmed by that.
I love that. That's good stuff. Feeling inadequate, feeling exhausted, feeling like basically there's too much going on, right?
That I can't control. Yeah.
That is good stuff. What was the word you used earlier again, Grace? Because I looked it up. I just want to make sure. I want to see if you're saying it properly.
Okay.
Exacerbated.
English quiz. Ooh, producer Chris.
Exacerbated.
Exacerbated.
That is correct.
Oh, where's the ding ding ding?
Correct. Hit the ding ding.
Or is that applause?
He
we don't have a ding ding ding.
Hey, yes, exacerbate is to make a problem, bad situation, or negative feeling worse. Mm-hmm. So you use the right word in context. She gets a prize.
What's my prize?
She gets a
I'm
prize.
so excited.
Okay, let me jump in with my thoughts. I don't know how to add to what Grace has shared, but here's a couple things. As I would say this, when you feel overwhelmed, I think is a good time to do what's counterintuitive. And what I mean by that is when you're overwhelmed with parenting, oftentimes you lean into parenting more, right? All the things you talked about. There's so much to do. The only way to get overwhelmed is to do all the things I'm supposed to do so I can check them off my list or whatever. I would suggest doing what's counterintuitive is when you feel overwhelmed by parenting is when you take care of yourself. That's when you figure out, how do I refresh my soul? So if you're a runner, don't quit running when you feel overwhelmed parenting. That's when you make sure you don't skip your evening run. If you enjoy reading fiction, that helps you unplug. When you're overwhelmed, don't quit reading. Like, make sure you protect the stuff in your life that kind of fills you up, right? Don't quit having your quiet time, your prayer time. When you feel overwhelmed, lean into that. And it's kind of counterintuitive, but taking care of yourself in your overwhelmed seasons, I think is sort of like priority number one.
Yes.
I think this one is you can't avoid, and we mentioned this at the beginning, you cannot avoid seasons of being overwhelmed. You can't. What you can control is whether or not you navigate those seasons alone. Whether you kind of try to figure it out by yourself. Maybe you don't think anybody else can relate. Maybe you're a little bit embarrassed to ask for help. But I would say when you're feeling overwhelmed, invite others to be a part of that. One of the things that I've learned is that, like, what overwhelms me doesn't necessarily overwhelm Rachel, and vice versa. So I think one like real practical skill is, if you're married, like when you're overwhelmed with something, maybe it's getting the kids ready for school in the morning completely overwhelms you and it sets your day off on a bad foot, but your spouse, it doesn't bother them at all.
Yeah.
Well, maybe you shift that responsibility, right? For a season or permanently, and kind of figure out like, hey, this parenting thing is meant to be a partnership.
Yeah.
And there's no way both of us are doing everything all the time.
Yeah.
So why don't we figure out what overwhelms me, what overwhelms you, and see if we can kind of trade some stuff now and then to help each other out a little bit. And then I think, and I just mentioned, I think sometimes we feel overwhelmed because we just don't think anybody else is struggling with the same stuff. And so I would just encourage you as parents, one of the habits that I've made in my life, not just parenting, but spiritually and in most things that are important to me, is I always try to find somebody who's maybe one or two steps ahead of me in the process. So I like to surf. I'm not super good at it. So what I've done is I recently found a group of guys who I knew that I'm friends with them, and I know they surf a lot more than I do at places that have way better waves than I want to surf, or maybe that I'm qualified. But I've decided I want to get better, so I start going with them. Like I'm saying, okay, can I tag along because I can learn from you because you're a step further. In parenting, I think it's the same. Like if you're the parent of a middle schooler, find a parent of a high schooler and say, hey, you lived through this.
Yeah.
You didn't kill your child. Can we get coffee once in a while? I can just pick your brain about raising middle schoolers. Yeah. If maybe you have a child who's really struggling in an area, really struggling with something, well, maybe you could figure out, how do I find another parent whose child struggled with the same thing and help find out from them, how do they navigate that?
Yeah.
How do they, kind of like a been there, done that kind of thing. Yeah. Hey, and I'm talking sometimes even like the stuff that you kind of are really embarrassed. Maybe you have a child who's self-harming or has an eating disorder or is caught up in some really bad stuff that's scaring you. It's a scary stuff, right? And you don't want to talk to anybody about that because you're embarrassed, because it reflects on me as a parent and all that kind of stuff.
So true.
There's somebody in your church, there's somebody in your community who their son or daughter went through the exact same thing. Yeah. And they might have some really good wisdom to share. Yeah. If you're willing to ask. And most parents would be willing to take a half hour, 45 minutes at Starbucks and say, hey, here was our journey. Here's some things we learned. Here's some stuff to think about. Yeah. It may not solve all the problems, but it kind of relieves you of carrying that burden and that experience on your own. Yeah. And then sort of a final thought is that I think some of our sense of feeling overwhelmed is self-inflicted. Mm-hmm. Like a lot of the reasons we feel overwhelmed is because of our own stuff, right? We put too much pressure on ourselves, or maybe we have too high of expectations on our children, right? We put too much pressure on ourselves. We put too much pressure on our kids. Yeah. We're overwhelmed maybe because we've overemphasized the wrong thing. So I'll pick on you for a minute, Grace. Yeah. Like the nail biting. Yeah. Right? I mean, I wish I didn't bite my nails. Yeah. I wish I would have kicked that habit years ago. I didn't. My life's pretty awesome. Yeah. Like I've kind of accomplished a lot of what I think God has called me to do. I've got a pretty good marriage. I've raised 2 pretty good kids. I've got 2 super cute grandkids. I went surfing this morning with my good buddies. Right. I fell a few times on waves that I shouldn't have, but I don't think it's because my fingernails it's not because my fingernails were too short.
It threw you off balance, Kurt.
So sometimes, like at the end of the day, how much of your time, energy, stress, overwhelmedness is nail biting worth, right? Now, every parent has to figure that out for themselves. Yep. I would just suggest that you maybe, not you, Grace, I'm not saying you generically, you as parents in the world, we as parents in the world, sometimes we're overwhelmed because we're overemphasizing the wrong things. Yeah. There's a lot of stuff that we can underemphasize that we overemphasize. Yes. It's almost not an issue at all, but we make it a major issue. Right. Right? And I think that is a self-inflicted source of overwhelmedness. Yeah. Parenting has shifted in the last 30 years or more than that. I think of the parents that we were all raised with. I can speak for me and Chris, maybe not so much for you, Grace, because you're 15 years younger than us. Latchkey kid, Chris, you mentioned that either this episode or last week. I was kind of that. Two working parents, very poor, left on my own all the time, figure life out. Hey, come home after, as long as you're home before dark. When I was in middle school, I could say to my mom and dad, hey, if you wake up tomorrow and I'm not here, this is in middle school. Yeah. If you wake up tomorrow and I'm not here, that meant I either spent the night at Mike's house or Gary's house. Wow. Okay. Yeah. Okay, Kurt.
Yeah, same.
And in between, they had no idea. I'm out running the streets, right? It was it was crazy. And now things have shifted. Like the phrase mama bear. Yeah. The phrase helicopter parent. None of that. Oh, no. None of that. I'm going to coin a word because we've all heard about Karen, right? The Karens of the world. I think there's Karens. Karen. You're a Karen. You're like the parent version. Oh, that is a big word. That's a new word.
It has come into it.
It's come in. I've coined it. But it's like everything you see about Karens put into the parenting arena, that's a Karen. A Karent.
Ah, okay.
And there's a whole lot of Karens out there. And I would humbly suggest, I don't think we want to go back. I think the way Chris and I were raised, I think it had a lot of, I carry a lot of baggage today based on, my parents loved me, but there's a better way to parent. I think we're closer to what the better way is now.
Yeah.
It's almost sometimes like the pendulum has swung so far that we're parenting instead of parenting. And when we parent, what we're doing is, I think we're overemphasizing stuff that should be underemphasized and maybe not even worried about very much at all.
Right. And what's so, I think, important about that is not just for the kids, because like you said when we first started this episode, this is about the parents. You know, when you do that overemphasis, when you are kind of isolating yourself, or when you are not taking care of yourself, these things that you are encouraging parents to do, we get overwhelmed, you know, and that's the result. And when we're overwhelmed, when we're feeling fatigued and burned out, and we actually don't want to parent anymore sometimes. We're just like, ugh, how do we run away? How do we escape? Or how do we relieve this anxiety and make, kind of bad decisions in that sense too.
Awesome.
So,
Well, man, good stuff. Good thoughts, Grace. Hey, everybody, thanks so much for listening. Here's what we hope. We hope that even if you're not a church attender, or maybe you are and you know somebody who isn't, one of the goals of this podcast is that the stuff we talk about would help any parent, right? Now, we have our goal. We have the parenting goal of raising interdependent, lifelong followers of Jesus who want to make a kingdom contribution. And we're not ashamed of that. We think that's the way to raise kids. We think that's what matters most. But we try not to be super overly churchy and overly preachy. So parents, we hope that you would pass this podcast on to another parent, whether they're a person of faith or not, because we think there's stuff in here that will help them win as parents, even if their end goal maybe is different than the one that we've stated as what we think is a good end goal. That's okay. We're talking about, at the end of the day, we all love our kids. And at the end of the day, we want the best for our kids. And so, man, we would love it if listeners out there would share this with your churched friends, your unchurched friends. We don't talk a lot about our church because this podcast isn't just for people that go to our church. So thanks for listening. Thanks for spreading the word.
Thanks for joining the On Purpose Parents podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, you can help us by rating and reviewing our podcast on iTunes. If you're listening on our Saddleback Parents YouTube channel, please like and leave a comment. Also, remember to subscribe to our podcast and share it with your friends. You can connect with us by texting the word parents to the number 83000, following us on Instagram at Saddleback Parents, and emailing your comments to parents@saddleback.com. As a huge thank you, you can browse our hundreds of free resources at onpurposeparents.com, all created to help you win at parenting. We'll catch you next time.